They might have sought for feeling in bad relationships, one after another, after another. Or they might have sought through taking a social drink, but it felt a little empty, so then there was a need for another and another and another, or sometimes it might be drugs or any number of things. Our searching, our needing so desperately to be filled can take us down so many empty, meaningless kinds of roads. Those are some of the hungers of our lives. And perhaps today it can be profitable for us to think about physical hunger. We started out talking about physical hungering, some of those wonderful foods on the table. And sometimes maybe it is productive for us to think about physical hunger and the need that we all have to move toward the refrigerator or toward the table because we have to fulfill our physical hunger, don't we? We know that as human beings, we cannot survive without food to eat. And we go looking for it, searching for it on a very, very regular basis. So it might be important to think about the drive toward those physical hungers, because perhaps it could help us to relate to the other hungers of our lives. And we could begin to name some of those. Hunger for acceptance. Hunger to be heard. The hunger to be loved. And folks, though sometimes we don't want to acknowledge it, those not physical kinds of needs of our lives can be even stronger, more demanding to be filled than the very physical hunger we just talked about. In desperation, we can find ourselves going here, going there, expecting this person or that person to be the filling point in our lives, expecting this thing or that thing to fulfill us. But through this passage in the Gospel of John, we are reminded of what the real need of our lives is. The real need of our lives, that which can fill us for all time and all eternity, is the bread of life. You and I need encounters with Jesus Christ. And it's not a one-time encounter that does it for us all, for all of our lives, but rather we need everyday encounters with Jesus Christ. And Jesus tells us that when we seek Him, we will find Him. A couple of Wednesday nights ago, in our devotional time around the table, we looked at Psalm 46. And the focal verse in that psalm is verse 10. Be still and know that I am God. Sometimes you and I are tempted to say, well, you know, I looked for Jesus, but I didn't exactly find Him. And what we have to acknowledge is that when we're hurrying about, and we're doing this and we're doing that, we're going here and we're going there, sometimes in the busyness of our lives, it's not so easy to discover Jesus, the bread of life. And so Jesus calls us aside. He calls us into our time of quiet, where He has the opportunity to encounter us. In the quiet, we can allow God to speak to us about His amazing love for us. And He can provide for us His amazing sense of reassurance. In that time of quiet, we can be reminded that God has a plan for each of our lives. We can be reminded you that God has a plan for our families, and that God has a plan for the life of our nation, and that God has a plan for our whole world, and always that plan of God's is good. God's desire always is that we know one another, and that we love one another, and that we reach out in peace toward one another. We know painfully so that when we're left to our own devices, that our plan might go in an entirely different direction than God's plan of peace for our lives, living in relationship with each other. But as we sit in the presence of Christ, we can be filled. Christ can nourish us. Christ can speak to us about that plan that He has for our lives. Christ is the bread that never runs out, the bread that fills us, the bread that is able to sustain us no matter what is going on in our lives. The bread that sustains us in our times of trouble or turmoil, or times of questioning in the faith, in our times of all things going awry in our lives or in the lives of our family. Christ, the bread of life, is able to nourish us into better places of existence. Christ, the bread, is able to teach us better patterns of living. You and I need so desperately every day to be informed about the character of Christ, about His focus for our existence, about His pattern for our living. Our own pattern for living is often involves self-absorption and selfishness and looking after old number one. But as we sit in the presence of Christ, we are reminded of the pattern of laying down one's own life in service to the world. Yes, as we sit in the presence of Christ, He is able to nourish us and fill us and to prepare us for living each day of our lives. Today, on this Sunday before Thanksgiving, I am thankful for opportunities that lie ahead. I'm thankful for opportunities I will have to sit at table with family and friends, and I'm thankful for opportunities that you will have to sit at table with family and friends. And my prayer, as we sit with family and friends, and we see a bounteous spread of food spread before us, is that we will have a profound sense of Christ, the bread of life, the one who is there for us, the one who nourishes us and sustains us every day of our lives. Thanks be to God. Amen. Our closing hymn today is number 92. A beautiful hymn singing about the beauty of the earth. As you are able, would you stand? If you'd like to spend time in prayer at the altar, I encourage you to do so. If there's a decision you need to make, I'll be at the front to receive you. Let us stand. We'll sing verses 1, 2, 5, and 6.